So if you're thinking we're going to do a very slow-paced, emotional, and loving memory of Grandma June, yeah, we're going to have some of that, but we're also going to share with you some of the fun-filled stories and things in her life that you had no idea that she did. Some of you may have known her by her maiden name of June Purviance. Others may have known her by her married name of June Moore. Then, of course, there were some very special names like Grandma June. So come with us now as we take a journey with this remarkable daughter, sister, mother, and grandmother. June was born June Caroline Purviance on October 10, 1930, the first of 4 children born to Elizabeth, better known as Betty, and Gordon Purviance. Her sister, Joanne, was born in 1933, and her twin brothers Jerry and Gordon were born in 1934. She lived in a very beautiful and unusual home designed and furnished by her father in Vancouver, Washington. June was a very gifted child musically. She started playing advanced piano at the age of 4 with the help of her grandmother. Her father and mother also encouraged this by purchasing a baby grand piano for the family. June recalls playing the baby grand at age 5 because she could not reach the pedals below. She enjoyed playing for others as well as recitals, but most of all she loved shopping for new music with her grandmother who lived just over the river in Portland, Oregon. The Great Depression in the 1930s did not affect the family that much. This was because her dad was in the newspaper business and everyone was still willing to pay a nickel for a newspaper, especially to get the latest help wanted ads. June recalls strangers coming to the back door, begging for food, and her mother making sandwiches for them. Growing up was a lot of fun. She recalls her dad had children's murals painted in the backyard, elaborate Christmas displays in front of the house, and playing games like Annie, Annie Over. Her dad taught her the importance of work at an early age. All the kids had either paper routes or jobs selling newspapers. June recalls selling newspapers at the Kaiser shipyards in World War II, and to the Indians on reservations. Her dad loved the outdoors, and June remembers the great vacations to Long Beach and camping experiences. As June got older, she joined the Campfire Girls and learned all about camping, cooking, and sewing. At age 15, June was at a crossroads. She loved the piano, but now loved singing. So she asked her mom if she could do both singing and advanced piano lessons, but her mom said she could only choose one. So she switched to singing. The singing lessons paid off, and in her senior year at Vancouver High School, she won top vocal honors in a music competition which included students from both Oregon and Washington. The award was a 4-year scholarship to Pacific University in Forest Grove, Oregon. She loved college. She became vice president of her freshman class and joined a sorority. Her close friends gave her the nickname of Junie. It was also during this time that she fell in love with performing on the stage. She had many roles, including Bertha in The Red Mill, Katisha in The Mikado, Meg Brockie in Brigadoon, Margarita in Song of Norway, Ellie in Showboat, and Miss Spotford in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Her first summer of college was spent working at the Lodge in Crater Lake National Park, Oregon. There she cleaned rooms as well as waitressing in the dining room. She loved the experience. June also had some great college roommates. One of them was Gene Anderson from Alaska. Her father was the famous Anton Anderson, better known as Mr. Alaska Railroad. So June and Gene got guaranteed summer jobs at the hotel in Mount McKinley National Park, Alaska, or better known today as Denali National Park. This was an exciting time for June. She recalls taking a 5-day boat trip on the SS Barron from Seattle, Washington to Seward, Alaska, then taking the train to Mount McKinley. She became one of the top waitresses at the hotel and was assigned to serve top dignitaries in the dining room. One of these was Thomas E. Dewey. If you recall, Dewey lost to Harry Truman in the 1948 presidential race. June remembered him well because he had false teeth and asked her to cut the corn off the cob for him. June and Gene worked in Alaska for 2 summers. However, in the summer of 1951, June got a call from her sister Joanne. Dad is in the hospital and you've got to get back here right away. Jean overheard the phone conversation and called her father. So before June had even gotten off the phone, she was booked on an aircraft to rush her home. June's dad made it through the heart procedure at St. Vincent's Hospital in Oregon, but never fully recovered. After 7 months of being ill, June's father, Gordon Purviance, passed away on February 6, 1952. He was only 47 years old. June continued going to Pacific University and graduated on May 24, 1953, with a music and teaching degree. In 1953, she started her first teaching position as a chorus and music teacher at Fruit Valley School in Vancouver, Washington. In the summer of 1954, after saving her money for many months and planning, June took a 7-week trip to Europe. Her trip included crossing the United States to New York by train, then crossing the Atlantic Ocean to Europe by cruise ship. She went with her good friend Annie Thompson. June recalls spending $1,200 on the trip. Back then, the average price of a home was $10,500, so that was a lot of money back then. June recalls leaving Portland by bus. On the way, the bus hit a cow, but still made it to Kuna, Idaho, where Annie grew up. They visited Annie's mom, then took the train to New York, New York. They stayed at the Hotel Belvedere and met up with their friend Marty, who showed them New York City. The 7-day cruise from New York to Paris was on the famous ship Ile-de-France. June got seasick 2 out of the 7 days. The other 5 days were wonderful, and she even sang for some of the passengers. She recalls Europe was amazing, seeing all the major tourist attractions and countries. The one disappointment she recalls was not being able to attend the wedding of her brother Gordon, as her travel plans could not be changed. In August 1955, June moved to California. She had accepted an offer to teach music at Garfield Junior High School in Berkeley, California. She also performed in more shows. She played the witch in Hansel and Gretel, Nettie in Carousel, Miss Juniper in The Golden Apple, and Sheila Kavanaugh in the West Coast premiere of Sandhog. Ironically, the last 2 plays she did before getting married were Anne Deaver in All My Sons and Nancy in the 1959 production of Martha, performed at the San Rafael High School auditorium, where all 3 of her sons would later attend. In 1960, June Purviance became June Moore, as she married Robert W. Moore, better known as Bob, in San Rafael, California. Her brother Gordon walked her down the aisle, and her sister Joanne was the matron of honor. The newlyweds spent their honeymoon in Carmel, California. Bob worked as an insurance agent for Metropolitan Life, a major in the Air Force Reserve, and also managed the San Rafael Harbor as he loved sailboats. On September 17, 1961, June gave birth to their first son, Gordon Moore. June recalls taking trips up to see the proud grandparents driving a Volkswagen Bug. The back seat could be removed and had a perfect space for a crib. They would visit Bob's parents, Teresa and John, in Molalla, Oregon, then continue to Vancouver to visit Betty and the rest of the family. The apartment they were living in next to the harbor was very small, so they moved and rented a 3-bedroom home. June was now a teacher at Lagunitas Elementary School and was pregnant with her second son. Gregory Moore was born on May 30, 1963. With the family growing, Bob decided to open up his own insurance agency. On September 13, 1965, June gave birth to their third son, Gary Moore. They worked together, saved up their money, and with some additional financial help from Betty, purchased a waterfront home in 1968. As the kids grew up and Bob's business flourished, June decided to retire as a teacher. So in 1971, after 18 years of full-time teaching, she retired. At her retirement party, her cake was lovingly made in the shape of a baby grand piano. From here on out, everything she did was volunteer work. She became a Cub Scout den mother for her son's scouting group. She was so good at it that she was awarded Marin County's Den Mother of the Year in 1972 and later received the District Award of Merit. She also made the house a great place to grow up in. Her son's friends always felt welcomed, so rather than going to the neighbors were coming there. Everything was happening at the Moores, people would say. She loved that because she could see everyone having fun and, more importantly, keeping safe. These years were fun times for family vacations, taking camping trips in California, Oregon, Washington, and Canada. The family trips got an upgrade when Betty sold her motorhome to the family. With the motorhome, the family expanded their trips to weekend skiing in the Sierras, a trip to Mexico, and even turned the motorhome into a houseboat by using a unique barge called a camp-afloat. June had become a Catholic to marry Bob, so she not only continued teaching and singing music in the Catholic Church, but she also taught CCD catechism for many years. As a gift of appreciation, Father Woods of Blessed Sacrament Church gave her a 1-foot-tall Virgin Mary statue that he blessed in her honor. Over the years, June and Bob gave their kids an appreciation for boating, baseball, camping, scouts, Hawaii, Europe, etc. But the one thing they had lost was the appreciation for each other. So in the fall of 1980, after 20 years of marriage, they separated and filed for divorce. And even though it was a difficult time, looking back at it, it was the best thing for the family. The boys were now older and more independent. Gary was 15, Greg was 17, and Gordon was 19. At that time, Bob's insurance agency was doing very, very well, so he gave June the equivalent by paying off her home, all the property, and additional cash. On top of this, he paid for the boys' expenses, including room, board, and college. With the divorce behind her, June started to enjoy herself again. She set up some great trips with her boys. These included an annual summer boating trip up to the Sacramento Delta, the Pasadena Tournament of Roses Parade with the Rose Bowl football game, and the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. June also went back to her roots, doing the things she loves so much. She started singing with the Dominican College Chorus and the Marin Opera Company. She tried out and got the part of Mrs. Winemiller in Dominican College's presentation of Tennessee Williams' Summer and Smoke. June was also accepted into San Francisco State University and graduated with a master's in teaching. In 1993, June became Grandma June, with the birth of her first 2 grandsons. Stephen was born in the month of June, and Michael was born in the month of October. She absolutely loved being a grandmother. In 1996, Grandma June had 2 more grandchildren. Amanda was born in the month of April, and Andrew was born in the month of June. In 1999, June got involved with the Marin County, California Literacy Program. Not only did she teach English as a second language to the Hispanic community, she also taught communication skills related to the workplace, helping employees communicate better with their supervisors and peers. The program was so effective that she was given an award by the Marin County Board of Supervisors. The Broderbund Corporation also heard about her course and had her teach it to their employees. In October 2000, Caitlin Moore was born, giving Grandma June her 5th grandchild. She did a lot with the grandchildren, from sleepovers to piano lessons to play dates at the park, swimming in the neighborhood pool to children's discovery museums to restaurants and so many more. Grandma June absolutely adored her grandchildren, and the grandchildren absolutely adored her. Over the years, there were more parties and vacations, and she loved to drive up to Vancouver to see her brothers, their families, and friends. On October 10, 2010, Grandma June celebrated her 80th birthday. She would always say, "I don't feel that old." Eventually, Grandma June became too old to drive her car. And although she was still participating in annual Delta trips, beach trips, Christmas parties, and other family events, she was now staying more at home.
I led a very happy life. And I think I've been very well taken care of around here, and my family is very special to me.
Grandma June was happy-go-lucky to the end. She died at her home, in her favorite chair, while sleeping on September 2nd, 2017.
I was born at Clark General Hospital in Vancouver, Washington in 1930. And I lived in Vancouver, Washington, 121 West 29th Street. My father was in the newspaper business. And the newspaper business, it didn't matter how poor somebody was, they could always afford a newspaper. So the newspaper business flourished during the Depression. And we lived in a very nice house that my dad helped to design because he liked to do stuff like that. The house was a two-door, Tudor. I think that's what they called it. And it was kind of English style. And it was quite big. Everybody had their own room. 2-story, no, 3-story, because we used the basement too. And we had lots of pear trees and camellias. I started playing piano when I was 4 because my grandmother and my Aunt Helen were piano teachers, and I used to stay with them a lot, and they started me out. So when I was about 5, I got the baby grand piano, which is like that one.
So you were considered what they would call a prodigy at that time, correct, or no?
Actually, it was in the paper that I was going to be in this recital, but I don't think I played that well. But I did. I picked it up real fast.
Uh-huh.
Because I had a good ear, I think.
And you were pretty much a sight reader. You, instead of going in to buy books at bookstores, a lot of times you just go into where the music section was. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I did. Oh, yes. How'd you know that? I didn't know you knew that.
I don't know.
I did. I would go in there and I would grab a piece of music and have the lady play it for me before I bought it. And I think every time we went to Myron Frank in Portland, we went down there and got a piece of music for me. And that was something I liked to do. And stayed at my grandmother's house a lot, so I did a lot of piano playing there.
And did your grandma, did she live in Vancouver, or where'd she live?
She lived in Portland.
Portland, okay.
Yeah. And my dad was from Portland, my mom was from Salem.
So now, did your mom meet your dad in the newspaper business, or where did your mom meet your dad?
My mother was in training for a nurse, and my dad had tuberculosis in the TB hospital in Salem, and he was one of her patients, which is kind of romantic, I think.
And then tell me about the backyard. You were telling me at one point that you had murals painted on the walls in the backyard. Your dad did? Something like that.
We had the biggest playground in the neighborhood. And my dad took and made fences and would paint them and put cartoons and things on them. And I think the opening fence said something like, "We're glad to have you play with us if your parents permit it."
Oh, that's cute.
And there was a rhyme there, but I don't remember how else it rhymed. There was a little wading pond, and we waded in it and waded in it, and then pretty soon it was only a foot deep. We couldn't really use that, so Dad turned it into a fish pond. We did have chickens during the war. My dad was in the newspaper business, and people often paid their bills by giving him rabbits and chickens.
Now, when the Depression hit, my understanding is you guys had a back alley at the house, and your mom
Yes,
would leave,
we did.
and your mom would leave food out for some of the people. Tell me about that.
People would come to the door and knock on the back door. They never came to the front door. And evidently they were men that were looking for work, and they had come into Vancouver on the train and gotten off the train and just were wandering around looking for work. And they would come up the alleys. It was kind of scary, and ask for food. Yeah, I remember that.
So tell me about some of the games that you played as a kid. Didn't you jump off a roof or something? I can't remember what you did.
We played Andy Andy over. And usually it's done with a tennis ball. And evidently, there was a girl in the neighborhood that was disliked. And they did it with a croquet ball and it hit her. That was not funny. I mean, we were in trouble. Really bad trouble. The rich kids were throwing croquet balls at the poor kids.
Oh no!
Oh dear!
So tell me about now. Growing up was a lot of fun. You guys would do like go crabbing and getting clams. Tell me about that.
Every year we went to Long Beach, and sometimes we stayed for a good long time. And there was a house down there. It's still there, or it still was the last time we were there. You were there. I think we picked it out. And it was just, it wasn't right on the beach, but it was great. And it had bunk beds, and I remember that's the first bunk bed that I ever stayed in. But yeah, it was a great place to go. Eventually, we took to camping, and we would go down to a place called Beard's Hollow and put the tent up and camp. And once in a while, my parents would leave and go back to Vancouver for business, and they would leave us kids there. And we had to load water on the bicycles. And we had great big bags from paper routes. And we would put a big canteen on there and go up the road and get water from a stream, which is kind of unusual, and bring it back, and then we had water. So and my sister and I insisted, before we went into town, we always insisted on curling our hair. So if we were going to go into shop, and we had to go in on bicycles, if we were going to go into shop, we always set our hair very carefully so that would look good when we went into town. Yep, that's our Long Beach.
Well, now your dad, didn't he come up with like a camping kind of setup? Was it a trailer or what did he have?
Yeah, it was marvelous. It was to carry a boat on top, and then it was made so that there were sides that folded down, and you could carry all the boat equipment in one place, and you could carry sleeping bags in another place, all that you needed, you know. And there was one section that was always parked right up by where we were going to cook. And the thing folded down, and there was a drawer pulled out, and there was all of your utensils, your silverware, everything that you needed to cook. Pots and pans. Then, then when we left to go someplace, we'd close that all up, put the boat back on the trailer, and go.
So tell me about the actual crabbing and clamming, because back then they were plentiful, I believe. Tell me what you would do to get the crabs.
Joanne and I cheated. We would say that we were too cold, and we would go sit up in the sand and not do anything. But in order to get crabs, my dad, he'd never do it himself. My dad would get us all to take our shoes off, and the water on a very low tide would go way far out and leave great big crab holes in the sand. This was at Long Beach. And we had fresh crab. Nice. We'd go after clams and come back with crab. So that was nice. My dad would give us a breakfast of an orange. And we would go out and we would dig clams and crab, and then we'd come back in and have clams for breakfast. We were camped near to an Indian reservation, and my dad always liked to sell papers because of the color funny papers he would put on the outside.
Yes.
And he would take them over, and the Indians would buy them because they were colorful. I remember taking the papers around and trying to sell them, and the teepees were the traditional Washington State round teepee. And there's no place to knock on the door. And the Indian children would laugh, and I would go around and around. There was no entrance. It was all folded over, and the Indian children laughed at me, and I was very upset.
You guys were in competition with another paper.
Yes, we
and
were.
What was that?
The Oregonian, and it's the only one up there now.
So now yours was called the what?
Oregon Journal.
Okay, Oregon Journal.
Yeah.
So now, didn't you try to trick people to pretend like you're selling one type of paper for another or something?
We did, and we tried to turn them into the Seattle paper. We sold papers at the shipyards during the war, and people would come after work and grab a paper and go home. And so we would yell. I don't know, I must have been about 12, 13, and we would yell, Seattle PI, that's Seattle Post Intelligence, Oregonian, Oregon Journal, but all we had were the journals.
So people would come up.
I know, and they'd think it was very funny and take them anyway. Just a bunch of little kids.